Hi, I'm Kat Matlock, founder of Freedom of Movement Bodyworks. I'm a trigger point therapist since 1993, and I specialize in the reduction and elimination of chronic pain. And this is freedom from carpal tunnel syndrome. Most of the pain in our bodies is due to an imbalance in tension in the muscles on either side of a joint. So in the wrist, we have the flexors of the wrist that pull the wrist this way. And then we have the extensors of the wrist that lift the wrist in this direction. Now we're going to show you how to release the tight and tender places in your muscles using a ball against the wall. By using a ball against the wall instead of your own hands, you're not taxing your other hand, which may also be experiencing pain. So when we're going to roll against the wall, you'll find that most of the trigger points in the muscles are in the upper half of the forearm. So the flexors, those muscles live primarily here. The bulk of the muscles are here. So you'll just make sure that you get this upper half of the forearm between the midpoint and the elbow. And the same with the extensors. Their trigger points live primarily in that upper half between the elbow and the midpoint of the forearm on both sides. You can use a variety of sizes and density of balls to shift the amount of pressure. Almost everybody has a tennis ball, so that's an easy one to have. I like to use a handball because it's a little bit smaller, so it can get in some other deeper places, and it's got a little more give. And then a high bounce ball is very hard, so when you really need to get more pressure, you can use this ball. But really, any of these balls will do the trick. Start with the ball just below the elbow. Sink in and gently roll until you find a very tender spot. Then pause and hold for a few breaths. Ideally, you will feel the point intensity lessen as you hold the pressure. After a few breaths, move around until you find another point, just slowly moving the ball around your arm. Repeat the process. Sink to just enough pressure that you feel the point is exquisite or special, or it may radiate down the arm into the hand or up into the elbow. Breathe and relax. Hold for a few breaths and hopefully feel the intensity at the point soften. Move on after 4 or 5 breaths, even if the sensation has not changed, and be careful to not press too hard. Carpal tunnel syndrome often occurs with repetitive stress disorders and overuse of the wrist flexors and extensors. So we treat both sides of the forearm to rebalance the tensional system of the wrist. Here we begin with the wrist extensors and making sure that we get all the points that we can find in the upper half of the arm, and then moving down into the lower portion of the arm to just see if there's anything there. To access the points in the flexor muscles, place your hand behind your back and lower your hand down a little bit on your bum, and then place the ball up in the upper part of the forearm. Then you'll turn and lean against the wall to access the points. And now rolling out the flexors of the arm to rebalance the tensional system between the extensors and the flexors. Trigger points are created by a message to contract from your brain. They're not just a nodule in your muscle. So when you're applying pressure to the points, you need just enough pressure with the ball to access the brain and kind of wake it up that it's stuck holding this place in contraction, but not so much pressure that you feel an extraordinary amount of pain, and that will make the muscle then contract even further. So it's a little bit of a finesse, finding just the right pressure so that you have enough to wake the brain up to this pattern, but not too much that it actually contracts even more. Because it is a function of the brain, the trigger points are habits of your brain. So the more regularly that you roll out your points, the more effective you will be in releasing these tensional patterns. Our brains like habits. So to spend a little bit of time every day for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks will help your brain to develop a new pattern, and it will stop holding those chronic tensional systems that are causing your pain. You'll realize and experience in your body that the points get fewer and less intense as you roll. It's estimated that about 85% of all chronic pain is due to trigger points, and the more adept you become at locating and releasing your trigger points, the less pain you will experience in your body. After you have rolled out the trigger points in your flexor muscles, now is the time to stretch them. So place your hand on the wall with your fingertips pointing toward behind you, and then straighten your arm. To increase the stretch, you take a step back, and that will add more stretch to the wrist flexors. Begin to press your palm into the wall a little bit. Just hold for a few seconds, and then back off the stretch by stepping forward. And that will soften the stretch that you experience. And then back up again. Go a little more deeply into the stretch. Try to keep your palm pressing into the wall. And then step forward and back off the stretch. Just do that a few times. And now to stretch the extensors of the wrist, place your fingers face down and back of the palm against the wall. Arm is straight. Begin to slide the hand up the wall to increase the stretch on the wrist extensors. Just go to a comfortable place of stretch. After a few seconds, slide your hands up a little further if that's comfortable. If not, slide the hand right back down the wall, not going too far into your stretch and just letting it be comfortable. Stay in the stretch for a few seconds and then pause and relax, and then go back into the stretch again. And do that a few times. Most of the pain in our bodies is due to an imbalance in tension in the muscles on either side of a joint. So in the wrist, we have the flexors of the wrist that pull the wrist this way, and then we have the extensors of the wrist that lift the wrist in this direction. These are the flexors, and these are the extensors. When there's an imbalance in the two, you can get carpal tunnel syndrome symptoms, or just pain in the wrist, numbness and tingling in the hands and the fingers. Right here, across the base of the hand, is the carpal tunnel itself. This band is also called the flexor retinaculum because the flexor tendons pass through this little tunnel. A retinaculum is a band of connective tissue that kind of just holds things in place. The tendons of the flexor muscles go through that little tunnel under the band, and also the median nerve that innervates the hand passes through there. So when the flexor muscles get out of balance, either too short or pulled too long from the extensors being really short, they can put pressure, those tendons, on the median nerve. In that case, it causes what's true carpal tunnel syndrome, which means pain, numbness, and tingling in the thumb and the first 3 fingers. The median nerve does not communicate with the pinky, so in true carpal tunnel syndrome, the pinky is not involved, just the thumb and the first 3 fingers. If you do also experience pain in your pinky, the rolling work that we'll do will also help that, because we're just restoring balance to this tensional system of the flexors and the extensors. But true carpal tunnel is only pain in the hand and numbness, and involving the thumb and these 3 fingers, or the whole hand itself. Other versions of what's called carpal tunnel syndrome include pain up the arm and even perhaps in the shoulder, in the chest. This is another situation. It's not true carpal tunnel syndrome. It can be a scalene syndrome where the neck muscles are pinching off the brachial plexus nerve bundle. The median nerve is part of that, but it branches off, and then that gets pinched here. This is another situation that rolling and self-work can help, but it's not true carpal tunnel syndrome. Carpal tunnel syndrome can be created by this imbalance in the extensors and the flexors of the wrist. In this position, which occurs often in typing, the extensors are short and tight and get loaded with trigger points, little focal points of tension in the muscles. and the flexor muscles get pulled long and tight. Tight doesn't always mean short. Often the muscles that are long and tight are the muscles that call out because they're being pulled against their will. So in this case, often a person is given a brace to stabilize the wrist so as to not pull the flexors or the extensors in a stretch, which would exacerbate the pain. Alternatively, the flexors can get short when you hold a baby or are holding things for a long period of time or having poor posture when lifting things and the wrist is held in a flexed position. These muscles can get very short and tight, and the extensor muscles get long and tight and weak. This will also create carpal tunnel symptoms, and you would be given a brace for this also so as to not pull the wrist flexors. Also, you may experience tendinitis at the elbow, and often a person is given a band to put right here to sort of take the tendons out of the equation so they're not pulling on this elbow. My experience is that in the long term that doesn't affect anything. It doesn't actually reduce the tension in the muscles, and it still creates, you still have that tendinitis kind of symptoms. So the best case scenario is to just roll out that tension to relieve the pull of the tendons on the bone, alleviate the tendinitis that you're experiencing. And again, you would roll both the extensors and the flexors in both of those conditions to alleviate the symptoms of the carpal tunnel and perhaps also tendinitis in the arm. So that's our practice that can help you to relieve the symptoms of carpal tunnel syndrome by releasing your flexors and extensors in your arm muscles. If you are sore the day after you try your rolling, just take a break, take a day off, maybe put a little ice on your muscles, and then try again the next day with a little bit less pressure.